Hello and welcome. This is our People Initiative community event. Today, I got Jay Grooms in the house. Jay Grooms in the house, human-centered leadership, and give it up, people.
Thank you so much, Jason. I love it.
Just have a good fade. Like, you know what? I really want there to be a good fade, and it's just like it just stops.
You need a laugh track too.
I do. I need a laugh track. I need like Vikings screaming in the background. Yeah. There's like a whole list of things that I want to get them added on here.
I love it.
Jody Forehand in the house, she loves you. She's over there in the living room checking out. That's where we put up your pictures that she purchased when we did our auction. So that's fantastic. We love that. Awesome. But we are here today this evening to talk about human-centered leadership. What the heck is that, and why should people care, Jay?
Well, that's a great question. And, the first one is easy. So I've been in leadership development and learning and development for a couple of decades now. And I have studied leadership in all forms, from business to nonprofit to community. And a lot of times leadership is misunderstood as the person that leads the tasks that need to happen, right? It's more of that feeling that I am the one responsible for everything that gets done. And so I have to push forward to get those goals and tasks done. Human-centered leadership is recognizing that the only way for a leader to be successful and get things done is through the people around them. And through their success, through their growth and development, and through their support. Because we're all human beings, and a leader has to understand what motivates individuals and what gets them going and how they can feel psychologically safe in the environment that you're in, no matter what level of leader you're at, whether you're an emerging leader and you don't have direct reports yet, or even up to senior executives. So human-centered leadership, besides being self-explanatory, is really about understanding the things that make people safe and grow and feel supported. And why it should matter is that right now, more than any time, and this has been especially growing and true over the last 3 or 4 years since we've been forced to face this in our business community, is that people understand what they want out of a job. And it's not just a paycheck. Yeah. And we've known for years that the number one reason people leave their job is because of their leader, right? So this is just taking a different approach that reminds the leader that their first job before anything else, no matter what they're doing, are the people that they lead, right? Yeah. So how much time are you spending focusing on them and giving them the things they need to succeed?
Well, I was hoping that I would not have to write this down, but I've got my phone here and I'm writing little notes down as we go so that I can refer back to it. But you stopped, so I'm like, okay, you just saved me. Like I'm fumbling with my little stylus. Like, oh my God, I don't want it to show on the camera that I'm writing this.
Take notes.
I'm taking notes. I love that. I love the fact that I can write that and I can do it. But one thing I want to clue in on, because I think it is so important. You said a lot of great things and we want to start to unpack it. But
sure,
you said a couple of things that I want to clue in right now. First, it is interesting that depending on who does the survey, paycheck is usually not even in the top 5 reasons why people leave a job. It's usually not even in the top 5. Yep. Not having a sense of a psychologically safe workplace is high. Having a sense of value, feeling like you are heard, you are seen, that your voice matters. Mm-hmm. These things are huge. Benefits is always up there. All right. Well, hey, yeah, I get paid, but then I got to spend all this money on benefits because you give me crappy benefits. It's all of those other things. The paycheck is important and people need their money to take care of themselves and their families, but it's usually all these other reasons. So let's dive in on something else that you said that I want to get to, because you're right. It should be human-centered leadership should be absolutely just a no-brainer. And there's so many people smarter than me that have put out the data that says, hey, when you pour into people, when you take care of them, when you pay a living wage, and you create all these psychologically safe spaces, guess what? Your P&L is going to thrive.
Productivity increases, innovation increases, engagement increases, longevity increases. Like there's data for all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to read or have someone be able to hear it. Either one, because I'm losing my hearing. So I understand if you can't hear, you have someone, hold it up and you read it. Other way, no matter where you are, being able to grasp this is fantastic, and it ties into human-centered leadership.
Mhm.
And the question that I present to you right now is, okay, I'm a leader, I get it, I'm going into a place where this is not the norm. Where do I begin?
That's a really great question. And I would argue that even though human-centered leadership or just compassionate leadership in general seems easy to understand, it is not easy to implement. First, as you're kind of alluding to, when you go into an environment where it doesn't exist, that takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of effort to try and change the hearts and minds of people around you. But there are four primary elements in human-centered leadership that I talk about in my book that's coming up, and I call it radiant influence. And so those are four interactions that you will have with all humans in your life. The first one is self, right? We have to understand ourselves. We have to understand what motivates us. What is our vision of who we are? What are our values? Have you taken time to understand who you are and what are the things that really push you forward and what makes you feel safe and what makes you feel unsafe or anxious? The next is other. So this is an individual, one-on-one. You're sitting down with someone, you're talking to them, you're engaged with them. It's a very different kind of interaction than you would say the next level, a group or your team. So I've got a team of 5 or 6 people that I work with or work together with, or they work for me. How do I engage and interact with them? And then the outside circle of all of this is community. So if I'm a leader, what impact am I having on the people around me? What are my decisions within the company doing to the broader community, the families of the people that I lead, the area that I live in, the other businesses? So all 4 of those layers are really critical to being successful in human-centered leadership. But the one you should start with, especially if you're in a place where it's not practiced yet, is self. Because all engagements need to boil right back down to self to start with that. Even within a conflict, whether it's positive, you got to go back to yourself and really start to think about, what do I want to do to practice these elements? There are a lot of different values that you could focus on. I've got 6 for human-centered leadership, but one of them in the first part is really courage. And courage as it relates to self is probably one of the hardest, because it means really examining, what are the things that I do that influence the people around me? What are the things that I do that I know are important to me? So for new folks going in, start to do some self-examination. Don't think about the outside world. Don't think about the external. Think about, in your own space, when you're alone, what are the things that are important to you? And then start to build those into who you are as a leader. Is it truth and ethics and integrity? Is it compassion for other people? Is it success? I like the feeling of getting places. I like the feeling of growing. That's okay. All of that, no matter how you feel and what your values are, they matter.
Right.
But that gives you an understanding then of how other people process the exact same way. And if you don't have the time or the courage to self-examine, it's really tough to understand and put yourself in somebody else's place to see what their values are, what their drivers and motivators are. So for the first thing, really, it takes some time to understand yourself, whether you are a leader now or you're trying to become one.
I absolutely agree with you. It's almost like any other adage that you've ever heard of. You can't pour into other people until you pour into yourself. Your cup can't be empty.
Yep.
No matter where you are and what analogy actually works for you.
Yeah.
What matters is you have to start with the person staring back at you in the mirror. And once you do that, because I was in a conversation earlier today, and they said, you also need to know your triggers. You
Hmm.
need to be able to set clear boundaries of what you can and cannot handle,
Yep.
and where you are as a human being, so that you can be the most effective leader. And understanding how to actively listen, but no, right, this is beyond me. We're going to have to get extra help for you, or this is out of my realm, so that people feel like you actually care, and that you're not just, oh, yeah, 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 I don't know how to help you, but I'm just going to nod my head.
Right.
I'm
Right.
just checking boxes
Yeah.
again. Then now we're
Yeah.
just going back to just checking boxes.
Yep.
So a leader comes in, they start with themselves, and
Right.
they come up with their parameters. They understand who they are, and then they move on to others. This one-on-one interaction.
Yeah.
What are the really important category, now after you've established yourself in dealing with other people one-on-one, which I think we should be having more one-on-one meetings with people, because I think we should be listening a lot more, and then expanding that into group and having people. We're going to help people thrive. But where do you start there to be someone who can build trust and can get people to talk to them, so that they don't do what normally happens in some places, where people just show up for the one-on-one, they say what
Right.
they think you want to hear, and then they're out. It's like,
Yeah.
is it time yet?
Yeah. Right. And we all feel it, and we know when someone's not really listening. Right. We play the
Yeah.
game where we kind of ping pong back and forth, just niceties, and you just hear that they're really not listening. But that's the key. The very first thing is, if you want to build trust, active listening, active understanding of what someone is saying. So the best thing a new leader can do in the first 30 days is nothing but listen. Going to meetings and listening, sitting down with your team and listening, and really paying attention. And one of the things that's hard is that we often get in this trap to think that leaders' jobs are to always be doing tasks, right? And to burn ourselves to the ground just for whatever the project or effort or company is doing. But when you're dealing with someone else, if you're setting that example, they're going to follow the example. I mean, one of the things I've said for years is you're leading by example all the time.
All the time.
It's up to you what that example is.
Absolutely.
So listening and actually sitting down and hearing what someone says, taking notes, making note of the individual preferences, individual values of the people that you're working with. In that 30 days, if you really focus on that, then trust begins to build. But it can't just be through listening. I will add that the other part of active listening is you have to be transparent, and you have to have what I call conscious authenticity, right? You have to be authentic.
I love that.
And real, but it has to be conscious. Like, you have to sit and think about, when you're talking to somebody, what are the things that I can share about how I'm feeling with things based on what I've heard from them? What is really driving them? If they're concerned about a task, if they feel like they don't have tools, I want to understand what that feels like. And I want to let them know that I'm going to be doing something to fix that, or that I am, there to help knock down barriers for them. If they don't trust me, that's worthless, and
Yep.
It's just a checkbox. If I get to the point where I said, you know what, I don't have access to those tools right now, I can't get them, I don't really think we're going to be able to budget for them. Can we brainstorm on some ways to get around it? Or can I take some other things off your plate to give you time? Is there something I can do to make this better without that tool? And that's being honest and authentic, and that's conscious. You're not giving excuses. You're not trying to duck out of things. You have
And
to
you're
be
not
one-
telling them that you can do it when you can't.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You're not making promises, which blows as much trust as if you did the opposite. So
that's called showing up, and if you do what you say, you'll get a lot further. But what's difficult for most leaders is that leaders are in an in-between, right? When I talk about the majority of leaders, 99% of leaders aren't at the top. They're not the boss. They're not the one who can make the decision independently. So there are a lot of things in between for leaders that they have to manage that upward part, and being honest and authentic with your team or your colleagues or people on other teams is the best way to earn their trust, because then they know when you say something, when you tell them something, they'll believe it. And that's what you're going for that.
Oh, such good stuff. Nick, thanks for joining us. Jody, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Kenny in the house, savor the flavor, my brother. Thank you for showing up. Appreciate you. I want to go now to the next step. So we're moving past that one-on-one. We've talked about self, and that is where it has to start, with knowing yourself, getting your parameters, knowing what you can handle, being aware of your triggers, being aware of what your capabilities, your strengths, your weaknesses are, and then moving into one-on-ones. Then now we're moving into group, right?
Yeah.
So that's the next thing is, okay, now we're moving into the next phase. Let's talk about that and kind of how that moves its way into what's going next.
Absolutely. So self is about examination, other is about engagement, and group is about creating an environment. So when you think about a team working on anything, there are a couple of things that in a human-centered leadership approach are critical. One, you have to find out how to set up a system to allow them to fail. The only way to learn is to fail. The only way to grow is to fail. And that sounds weird, but you have to create an environment where your team feels safe to try things, they feel safe to learn from things, and they feel safe to grow from whatever they have done and continue to be successful. Because where the trap is if you set up this, you did this wrong, I have to write this up, or we're going to have to talk about it, or pull you off that project, they're never going to try something again. Innovation is stifled, creativity is lost. So having things like regular team meetings where everyone shares the greatest learning that they've had in that week, or the biggest failure that they've had in that week.
Love that.
Setting up one day a month, where they can try something really radical that they're not sure if it'll work at all, but give the space for it, celebrate it, because if you can do that, people can move past it and find new solutions, right? The biggest thing I do is I like to set a point on the horizon and say, that's where we want to go. If I can create that energy, create that belief, and get everyone to want to go to that same point on the horizon, I wanted them to surprise me with how they get there. I don't want to be the one that says, that's the one trail, everybody hack at that one trail. I'd rather say, let's see if we can get to this conclusion. I want this vision to feel like everyone is part of it. And so it's mentioned, it's kind of the base of the pyramid for Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? You're building trust, you're in accountability, but that common vision is a really critical piece for the group, because you wouldn't have a group if you could do it by yourself. And I wish a lot of times more leaders understood that, but leaning into that talent, leaning into that energy that your team has, that's where you're going to excel. And that's why putting more of your time into them and less of your time into trying to manage what they're doing will get you way further. And it doesn't matter if you're in accounting or IT or marketing or operations, it's the same. It's the same human beings. So giving them opportunities to grow and fail is probably the biggest thing I can recommend. And make it formal.
Yeah, make it, well, you know what, and Desiree said it, Nick said it in here as well.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Desiree.
And I'm sorry, Desiree, I only saw you in that when you said, hey, wait, what about me? And so gotta love LinkedIn. Comments show up whenever they feel like showing up. But I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. It's such a great conversation. And Desiree and I have had plenty of these conversations, and she has them constantly with groups that we're in. Yeah. But, it's incredible to me. Leaders think that they are managing the process, when really, if they devoted their time, as you say, to their people and pouring in and listening and giving them the tools so that they can be successful and thrive, but at the same time, flipping the script and being, like, hey, we're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Here's the mistakes that I've made. And it's okay. When you fail, we're going to figure out how this works. And together we're going to learn. But I love you. One of the last things you said was before you stopped. And I was like, this is gold. But you rattled me because I hadn't written it down yet. But you were talking about the fact that leaders have to get people to understand that it's okay and buy into that process and trust them to feel like they're in a psychologically safe place. I just love it.
It's absolutely. If people don't feel safe, they won't share. I mean, we're in a place, just as our society at least is in the United States, is that jobs are critical, and having a job is critical, and it's your number one stressor, not having a job or having a job. So much comes along with that: your ability to pay rent and live, your insurance and health, all of those things attached. So that's one of our number one triggers, is fear of disrupting, which causes us to be in an out group, right? Little anthropology here, right? So our fear of being kicked out of the group is our strongest. So when you are with a team, making them feel like, when I try something and it doesn't work out the way I wanted, but I want to try it again, or I want to keep that learning and move forward, and there's no risk to my job, that's going to go really far. And pretty soon, those failures are going to reduce because they've learned from what they're doing. If you make someone terrified of making a mistake, then all their energy goes into avoiding making mistakes instead of innovating or finding new ways, or really energizing the team. So it's a tough thing to do, but there are really good ways to do it within team meetings, group meetings, setting up time, making sure that you're there and showing up. I like to have office hours. I know it sounds kind of old school, but there's some ways you can do it via Zoom. Have your Zoom on, be sitting at a coffee table, open it up to say, hey, anytime you want to log on to this meeting, if you want, in these 2 hours, I'm just available for you.
Yeah.
Right? Or setting up a Wellness Wednesday where we all, walk that day. Maybe we still have our phones. Maybe we're not remote. If we're in the office, we go for a walk. But there are ways to create that safety by building trust in little chunks and showing up each time for your team to remind them, my job is all of you. That's it.
I think that there are multiple times in the course of the day where we have opportunities to learn and grow with the people around us. And when we take those opportunities, and we are people that, we are the buffer, we are the people that are going to help others, and we're going to be there for the people on our teams. We're going to show up daily. That builds that trust over time.
Yeah.
And people see that, what? I just saw like these crazy things happening, but Chasen still showed up, and he still had a smile on his face, and he still said hello to me, and he still asked me if I wanted a cup of coffee. And, these little things that, how's your dog? You're a person your dog's everything. You got pictures of your dog. Noticing those things, writing those things down, and making sure that you're aware, that you make an effort to be that person that notices those things. I think it's very intuitive, and it takes you to the next level where those build up trusts are going to help you not only with your engagement. All of these things end up helping to the bottom line. So if you're really a leader that's focused on crunching the numbers and focused on being productive and being someone that just crushes the bottom line, then double, triple down, quadruple down on getting engaged with your people and learning about your people and showing up, because that is going to make more money on your P&L than anything else you will ever do, period.
100%.
Anything else you do.
But so that's not easy though. I mean, just for a second, I think one of the things that's difficult about taking this approach, and one of the reasons it's probably not as common as we would like it to be, is that, and Nick kind of pointed out, that they're the buffer. And like I said earlier, a leader has two directions that they have to deal with. They've got their people, which is the easy part. If you were the owner of a small company, you could just deal with your people any way you want, and you could practice these things. But for most of us, we've got a boss, and they've got a boss, and they've got a boss, right? So
Yep.
It's not just about managing your people. It's also about understanding how to manage up and how to help that person understand your approach and the benefits and how it's going to eventually serve the company, right? Because things like turnover, things like engagement, productivity, all of that gets better, but you have to buy some time, you have to get some understanding, you have to set up some expectations. It's all doable, but that's a hard pressure that leaders deal with all the time. And a lot of time it comes back to just results. And so that's an easy default under that pressure for leaders to simply go back to what you said of, I'm just crunching the numbers, I'm just driving for results. So it's tough. And I know a lot of people struggle with that part, but that's as important as focusing on your team and really leading yourself there.
Well, that's fantastic. And the fourth phase, and the fourth thing that you mentioned was now how this goes out to community. So we always talk about, when we're affecting change, that the people we affect change with, that has a rippling effect. And it has a rippling effect on the people on their team, the people that are in their family, and then this final ripple is the community at large. And I think that you hit on that. So let's dive in now to that last step in there of community and what that means and what that looks like after you've created these things within your work environment. And remember, we started, for those of you that may have come in late or that I didn't see you, when we started this conversation and we started diving into these points that Jay has in his program and what he believes with human-centered leadership, I posed the question, what if I'm a leader that's coming in to something that's dysfunctional? Where do I begin? So now you've created these wonderful things and you've gone, what's the component for community?
So if self is about examination and other is about engagement and group is about environment, community is about inclusivity. So the difficulty of community for most leaders is they still apply those small thinking ideas when they're dealing with individuals or groups, of driving individuals, because you only have a handful of people. You understand all of them if you're doing it right. You understand all of their needs, their values, the drivers. But community is about opening your mind to the idea that the more diverse the thoughts and ideas and approaches that come to you, the stronger your product, the stronger your effort, the stronger your company will be. And in that community level, you have to build understanding to really get to that inclusivity. Understanding people I don't know. Having the open mind to say there may be different ideas that I've not been exposed to that might be better than what I'm doing. And that's difficult because that's the part at which the center is our values. This is the furthest away. So we're struggling with that part because we want to apply our values to community. But community is not about our values. Community is about understanding everyone's values and how can everyone be included in this vision that I'm setting on the horizon. Right? What are the things that I can do that bring more in to my group, into my teams, into my company, that make my individual interactions richer and more productive for my team? And so that community element is really tough for a lot of people, and it really doesn't mean that it has to be like your community around you geographically. It could be, I'm in a team, in a group, in a department. How does this influence the whole company? What other ideas from around the company? How can I brainstorm or tap into some of the people that aren't even part of my group? And that's tough, but it's critical if you want to keep that whole system moving, because if you cut that off, pretty soon those three layers underneath it are going to get stale, and they're going to get start to burn out, and then you're going to get rotten, and then you're going to be back to where you were before, just managing tasks and managing things to get done. So that community piece on the end is really about creating a space where people want to be, by understanding them and including them in whatever vision you're setting. And for honestly, that's the part where giving yourself to others really shows up, right? By being there for volunteering, by doing things that help underserved groups, by giving of yourself on that outer sense. That's what attracts people to what you're doing, and doing it selflessly. I mean, for the reasons to help people. I
love that. And I certainly can say for everybody on this call, everybody that I've seen in the chat, the man that is next to me, other way, that way, and that certainly applies to everybody here. I really appreciate that, and I love that about you in particular. I'm going to brag on you for a little bit here. I love that about you in particular because you take human-centered leadership to the next level. You don't just talk about it. You actually live that, and you breathe it, and you are part of it. It's part of what you do. It's part of who you are. Yeah. And that's easy to see. It's easy to see in Nick. It's easy to see in Desiree. It's easy to see in Jody. It's easy to see in my boy Kenny. And I love that, because when you are a human-centered leader, when you do care about other people, you cannot hide that. You cannot hide that.
Yeah.
But I will say that I love the conversation. We're getting out of time. We're running out of time. So I want to try to get to a place where we can complete the circle. We've talked about what to do. We've talked about the steps. What's next in human-centered leadership? And then, and I want to save a few minutes towards the end here too. I want to talk about your book, man. I want to talk about that. I'm excited. And I'm expecting a signed copy. I will pay for it.
Absolutely.
I'm expecting a signed copy. So what's next in human-centered leadership? We've talked about this journey. We've gone all the way through community, but now, all of this work is ongoing. Just like any other DEI work, it is an ongoing, living, breathing beast. So what does that mean? And what can we do?
So it's one thing to understand it, and that really is the beginning. Beginning is understanding what human-centered leadership is. What are the values involved in that? How do I apply them on those 4 layers of radiant influence? But the next part is really have to make it a part of your work. You have to make it a part of your life. So you have to set up habits, and you have to create tasks and events. And part of that could be as simple as putting time on your calendar that blocks time for you to grow a little bit. Something that you want to learn a little bit more about human-centered leadership, compassionate leadership, learn a little bit more about just leadership in general, ways to improve yourself. Setting up time that's blocked on your calendar to begin to write out what your values are, begin to create a personal mission, begin to understand what your motivations are, and like you said, what your triggers are. And then from there, start to set up your habits for others and for your group. What do you do in team meetings? How do you set up systems and tasks that allow people to be themselves, that allow people to push back and have other ideas? Designating an official contrarian for each meeting, right? Rotate that around, make it their job to find ways to pick apart the things that you're talking about as a team and celebrate them for that, right? Everybody gets a turn at it. So those are just habits, and those are the things that build over time, because building relationships is, as we like to use the analogy, it's like a bank account, right? You're making deposits in somebody else's account by doing things for them, by showing up, by listening actively. And if you have that as a regular thing, don't cancel your one-on-ones, show up and actually be ready, then over time, that account really, really grows, and you can leverage that. If you're not doing that, you're just dealing with overdrawn accounts all the time, and you're not really going to make progress. So really, it's setting up some habits, getting some things really set up on your calendar, deciding that you're going to sit down and work on yourself to build that core and let the layers grow from there.
I love that, because that's, I mean, making the deposits is something that is in the conversations that I'm part of almost on a weekly basis. And it is so true. We are at a place now. I want to give you the last little shout out. Let's talk about your book. Let's talk about what you're doing with your consulting. I'm going to throw it up. I've thrown it up a couple of times. I'm going to throw it back up again. So what are you doing with your consulting? What are you doing with your book? Let's start with your book first.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress. It's something I've thought about for years as I've been working on human-centered leadership. I've had the real distinct honor of being able to put a lot of these concepts and a lot of the things that I've come up with over the years into actual programs that are really running right now with leaders in business all over the country. And so from all of that and the things I've learned from all of those leaders and all the people that I've stood in front of to teach this, I really wanted to get that information out and put it in the hands of anyone who was interested in it. So I call the book Human-Centered Leadership, Cultivating Courage, Compassion, and Connection. I like the alliteration. But it's a practical guide. And I think one of the things that's critical about it is I talk a little bit about the philosophy of what human-centered leadership is and what the main components are, but I'm putting in actual habits. So things that you can do, tasks that you can undertake to begin to build that. I don't believe in the word competencies, because to be competent kind of feels like a plateau and you're done. I like drivers, because you have to keep moving forward with those. You're never done growing. And so this content works for people who aren't leaders yet and want to be, works for brand new leaders, all the way up to leaders that have been doing this for years and years, because your blade gets dull. If you worked on something for a long time, you need to keep sharpening your blade. You need to keep getting better. So that's available. But in the meantime, I'm coaching leaders, which is my consulting business, and helping them to practice some of these things, helping them through, hey, I just set this up with my team, or I'm struggling with this individual, or I've got this project that's going to be really hard to present to my team. And we talk through that. And I just practice the same things that I practice with my direct reports in my consulting, is helping them start at the center, start with the self, and then learn the tactics for each of those layers as they grow and build that out. And I've seen great success, and I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from the people that I've coached. But it's a learning experience for me as well, because everyone's situation is different. Everyone's leadership situation has been, slightly different depending on what they're dealing with. But we're still talking about human beings, and in the end, these work with anyone wherever they are, because these are the things we want. And these are the things that make us feel safe and make us feel good. So human-centered leadership can be applied to any platform. And that's really what I'm trying to go there. So I'm looking for more mentees, more people to coach. If anyone's interested, definitely look up the website that Jason's been gracious enough to push out for a while.
No, man. Listen, I love you. Love what you're doing. Appreciate you. This guy is also a photographer, like award-winning photographer. It's incredible. And how do I know this? Because my wife on the last auction bought all 3 of his pictures that we were auctioning off, and we got them right here on the. Oh man, don't even get me started.
Thank you. It helps fill my cup.
I love it. You're super talented, man. And I thank you so much for being here tonight. I thank you for being part of this. Well, let's give it up for Jay Grooms, people.
Thank you.
Hey, I learned how to do a fade out.
Oh, that's a fade.
Look at that. All right, man. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody that came. Kenny and Desiree and Nick and Jody. Everybody that came and stopped by. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you supporting HR for You and supporting our buddy here, Jay, with Human-Centered Leadership. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will catch you next time. We'll be here tomorrow with James Valentine.